All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Finance Administration Committee meeting of Marin Water, August 28th, 9:30 in the morning. Uh, let's see, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, good morning, Vice Chair Diana Mayer. Here. And Chair Jed Smith.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. Any public comment on non-agenda items?
Yes, there are, but did you want to adopt the agenda first before we? Oh, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry.
All good.
Yes, go ahead.
I've been wrong before.
Yes.
I will
Yeah,
again.
I'd like to call Miss Ginger Saunders Mason, please.
Greetings. I just want to report that Los Angeles is no longer fluoridating their water, which is good news for those people. And there was no uh, state mandate police uh, down there trying to stop them from doing that. So it could be done here. Also, um, I have a letter I wanted to give you from a dentist, and it has to do with all the different things that are happening that happen because of the fluoridated water, that it is causing all kinds of physical problems for people that are not recorded anyplace as being fluoride related. So if I could just give you the citizen's petition. It also has references to everything he's talking about in that paper.
Yep.
So it's good news that we will finally find out what's going on, and I hope this particular agency will follow suit and reduce the fluoridation of our water. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Phil Sauter, please.
Yeah, good morning. Thursdays are broom pulling day in the valley,
Mr.
so I'll
Sauter, I'm going to pause you. Can you speak a little bit louder so we can hear you?
yeah, uh, Thursdays are broom pulling day in the valley, so I'll miss the financial presentation later today. I did look through the reports and wanted to comment on a couple of items that weren't included in the written material. First, I didn't see any breakout for sales of recycled water. I know it would be only 1% or 2% of our total water sales, but based on the recycled water presentation at Tuesday's planning board meeting, recycled water will become a more important source of additional revenue, particularly in drought years. If it's not too much trouble, it might be helpful to start breaking out recycled water sales. And second, in looking over the financial numbers for fiscal 2025, it appeared that our volume of water sales have continued to trend up year over year, while our dollar sales came in 3% below budget. I'm guessing this has to do with tier level assumptions for 2025 and that these may be reset in future rate adjustments. If we capture more of our heavy water use in tier 4, for example, it could help bring higher revenue along with our higher water use. And finally, I'm not sure how to interpret our water volume increases in the context of our focus on conservation as our number one source of water supply. I don't think our population has increased much over the past year, and perhaps we're not conserving as much as we hoped. I'll check the meeting recording when it's posted online and see if I've misunderstood the data. And thank you very much for the detailed information and congratulations on another year of stable financial results.
All right, terrific. We'll move on to our regular items on our agenda number 3. And approval of the minutes from the Finance and Administration Committee meeting on June 26th. Was that a full board meeting?
I don't believe that it was. It was just a committee meeting.
It was? Okay. All right. Any public comments on the minutes?
There are none.
And any corrections, comments?
No?
Good. So the minutes have been accepted. All good. And we'll move on to 3B, which would be our very own human resources report. Thank you, Vicky.
the regulatory enforcement department and then, a brief word on career progression. I'll briefly discuss employee turnover. And share some of the current recruitments that we have to backfill some of those positions. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Terry. To backfill those positions and career progression within the district and how the district supports employees so that they are available to participate in recruitments and advance when there are opportunities available. This is a snapshot of our district's employee turnover. The blue bar represents retirements. Orange are voluntary separations, and yellow are employees who did not pass probation over the years from 2020 to July of 2025. If you note the spike in 2021 and 22, that's due to a combination of two things. One, retirements and some outcomes of the COVID pandemic. So in that time period, there were a significant number of employees throughout the United States who were retirement eligible. Same here with the district. So we experienced those retirements. And then during and after the COVID pandemic, there was the Great Reconsideration and the Great Resignation, where people were moving around in job market to align their priorities to their job priorities to their personal priorities. And then you'll see in 2024 and 2025 that things are starting to stabilize for the district, reflecting our usual turnover as an organization.
No, I think you're actually better than usual. Those numbers the last 2 years are a lot less turnover than I recall in the decades before.
Yes.
I think you guys should take some credit.
Mhm.
So it's not just the existential factors, but you're doing the employee recognition.
Yes.
I think the management and thoughtfulness about how you're addressing staff, listening to staff is off the charts better than it was 2 years ago.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, I'm going to share some things that we're doing to support staff as they grow in the organization. So right now, these are our current recruitments, and those recruitments are the result of, some of the retirements, some promotions within the organization, and also new positions that became available in engineering, for example, the capital projects program. And so for our recruitments, we actually do conduct local and nationwide searches when we try to fill our positions. But some of our talent comes from within the organization. And that would be with current employees applying for open positions and they're successful. And also we have trainee programs, internships, seasonal work. And those are good sources of talent to fill vacant positions because they're familiar with the district and they have had some training. So internal promotions benefit both the employer and the employee. For us as the an employer, we can leverage existing knowledge and we're able to retain knowledge that people have gained while here and also benefit from the investment in training our employees. And it also promotes employee retention. Did you have a question?
Nope.
Okay, sorry. And provides opportunities because people see that there's opportunities for them to grow within the organization. So again, for the employee, it's the career growth opportunity as a benefit, and it's faster integration into their new role. This is also a benefit for the employer because projects can move faster or they can get underway faster as you have an employee who is familiar with the process or the district. Since 2021, there have been 85 internal promotions, and these are competitive promotions. Of course, some people have promoted a few times, so they're counted more than once in this number of 85 promotions.
Can I ask you a question? For non-competitive, how is that decided? Are there just certain positions, I know there's a slide coming up on this, but I was a little confused on that slide. That are deemed non-competitive, is there a requirement that certain kinds of jobs have to be put out to the public, as well as allowing internal applicants? How does that work?
So the non-competitive jobs are more like a promotion in place. And so when that position, it's already on the job description, so it's already noted to the public that if a person comes into that position, that they can advance to the next level
Okay.
without competition.
So it'd be like going from a level 2 to a level 3 or something like that.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
So often meeting standards,
Got it.
prescribed standards.
Got it. Okay, great.
So here are the competitive promotions in orange, and then the non-competitive ones that you just mentioned are in the gray. And that's just a snapshot. And I'll go into a little more detail on those non-competitive promotions. But to your point, Director Mayor, that competitive program is something that we use and we consider a resource for employee growth. So it's one of our resources. And so other resources for career progression include an interview skills workshop that we recently introduced, our job shadowing program. Our operations department has a robust training program for entry-level employees, which leads to a path to promotion. And I'll give you a little more information on that. And we talked about the flex staff just briefly, and then we do have a 5-year training program that is in development. And I'll talk about a few of those programs. Our interview skills workshop is, it was recently, we recently started offering that workshop to employees. It was designed by our training analyst, and that workshop is led by our lead recruiter and the training analyst. And in the workshop, participants learn how to prepare for a job interview, for example, research and practicing common questions, and they review a technique for formulating responses to questions. It's called the STAR method, where they describe a situation and demonstrate their skill in that area, what was their role, the action they took, and the results. And so it gives them that confidence going into the interview that they know they have a formula to use and they can completely answer the questions. And then we also train them on how to share their relevant work experience and voluntary experience. So far the reviews have been really good. We started the workshop in operations, and we're going to be moving it out to all district employees. The Ripple Committee recently created a job shadowing program. And so that program allows for employees the opportunity to obviously shadow other employees at the district. But this is helpful for understanding the work of other work units. And it's also available for employees for career exploration. Employees can shadow up to 8 hours for one work shift, and they have 2 opportunities throughout the year to shadow. And right now, the greatest interest is in the treatment plant, the ranger group, and construction inspection. That's where the biggest interest is. The operations department, I mentioned they have a robust training program. They actually have a standard operating procedure for training. It's called the SOP to support training and provide a transfer of institutional knowledge. So all of the new employees, they participate in a job rotation throughout the department. So they spend 3 months within systems maintenance, facilities maintenance, special projects, a month in the warehouse, a week in distribution, and a week in the treatment plant. And so that just gets them acclimated to the district. They have a full understanding of all of the work of the operations division and how one team impacts the other team. Let's see, they're provided with a checklist with a path to advancement, and that checklist has a number of things that they need to demonstrate competency in. So our skills and competence, where they need to demonstrate competency. And that can include things like hot tap and chainsaw operation, pulling materials for a job. And then the list also lists certifications that they need to have in order to advance. One is forklift certification, confined space certifications, traffic control. So all of that stuff is provided, and CPR provided to the employees, and it's helping them to grow in the position and giving them a path to advance. The district also trains employees to become commercial drivers. They get the Class A and Class B license for certain classifications, not all. The district is a designated trainer, registered trainer with the Department of Transportation. So we do all of our in-house training here. So this is all great for the employees. They get all of this stuff up front, and they have a path to progress throughout the organization. And this is a typical path. Utility worker could end up as a supervisor, starting in as an assistant utility maintenance worker, which is our laborer position, as a supervisor. And then another typical path is assistant utility worker to a heavy equipment operator. So this is a little bit more on the flexible staff program. And so we designed this program to really just have, as Ben said, objective criteria in terms of how one person would move from one level to another. And to the right are positions that you would typically find, or some examples of positions in the flexible staff program. So a meter reader 1 going to a meter reader 2. But this is a good way to retain employees because they see a path to move forward. And it allows them to move forward without competition, so they can promote in place. As you had your question, Director Mayor, about the process, there is a standardized review process. We do have a policy. There's a standardized review, and then we have a set number of job series. Not a number, but we have set job series that are already identified as participating in the program. We have the defined objective criteria for employees to promote, and that criteria is outlined in a job matrix for each job classification. So when they move in that, and the matrix is posted in our open text, which is our shared file. So an employee can go right in and see, what do I need to do to move to the next level? So they can start working on their skills.
Great.
So that's our flex staffing program. We also have 3 trainee programs, water treatment operator, distribution operator, and park ranger trainees. And this provides an opportunity for people, a pathway into the district, into utility, into public safety. It also, they get hands-on experience, training, mentorship, and this is intended to develop them, and those trainees to move into entry-level or journey-level positions. We have seasonal employees who are hired into regular positions as well. And that's, again, a great opportunity. And these are just some examples of some people who have started as either seasonal employees or interns and where they are today. We have a water quality intern who's now a water quality tech, a watershed aide, as you can see, progressed all the way through to utility crew leader from 2017 to now. GPS intern is now an assistant engineer. One of our watershed aides is a ranger, and then we had a summer helper working in the meter operations who returned to the district after finishing college and getting some other work experience, and is now working here as an IT analyst. So we try to use all of these things, opportunities to fill positions, but also provide opportunities for our employees within the organization. So we will continue to support employee career progression and continue to consider internal talent when we fill positions at the district.
Just a question, is there on the flexible staffing and part of the effort to promote internally as much as possible, are there jobs that were previously deemed non-flexible that are now flexible? So that there's like a path that's been carved out? Or are there just jobs that are inherently?
So for the flex staff, I think those are jobs that are inherently amenable to that kind of program,
Okay.
right? So we
Mhm.
want for example, our customer service rep one, we want all of our customer service reps to be operating at the customer service rep two level, right? So that's something that we want as a district. And so we budget for it and we hire with the intention of them moving into that level. We don't want them to stay at the one level.
But
So-
on the other hand,
Mhm.
there's jobs where it may not make sense necessarily for everyone to operate at the highest level of a job class. And so you staggered, or you only have a certain number of
Mm.
those that then are open for promotions, that sort of
Right.
Or
stuff.
you need someone with a different skill set to be.
Right.
So the
Got it.
customer, thank you, Ben, in that example, the customer service rep three, we only need 1 3. So
Mhm,
that would be a competition
mhm,
to get to
mhm.
that one, but
That's
you can flex
interesting.
all the way up to a 2. You can flex to the 2, but you cannot flex to the 3
That's
level.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. This is great. And I also, like Director Smith, was really heartened to see how much less turnover there is and how much internal promotions going on. So thank you very much.
Yeah, we have a very talented group of employees.
Yeah.
here.
We-
Mhm.
And it also just shows that you care about the whole person, not just their performance in one specific job, but their career and their lives. And this is really important work. I didn't know that we had this level of support and training, and thank you for showing that. Any public comments?
There are none.
Okay, great. Thank you for the report.
Thank you.
All right. So moving on to 3C, we have our monthly financial update with our head of finance, Brett Uppendahl.
Share my screen here. We'll get going. All right. Good morning, directors. My name is Brett Uppendahl, Finance Director here at the district. This is our monthly financial update. This covers, as you'll see in the report today, this will cover the first month of the current fiscal year, which was July. And we also have a little bit of information about our preliminary close for the prior year. As a reminder, we did not meet in July, so this is the first time we've taken a look at the fiscal year 24-25. As I mentioned, preliminary data. I say preliminary a few times here because we are still working on the back end, kind of finalizing all of our revenues and our accruals, and we're still processing invoices and kind of getting ready to shift things over into the next fiscal year. So there may be some final adjustments here as we get into the audit and kind of year-end wrap up. But these are still pretty good numbers in terms of our kind of trend lines to take a look at. This is, as you can see, the full year of water sales revenues. And if you kind of just jump to the bottom line, you'll see that most of these categories ended up within 2 to 3% of the total. Overall, if you look at the kind of net total of all water rate revenues, both our fixed fees and our variable fees, they ended up right around 97% of budget, so within 3% overall, and that's a really nice range. I've mentioned that a few times over the last couple months because this really starts to create the kind of overall trend lines. The year you're looking at here, the year before that, those create the overall trend lines that will largely influence any changes or modifications to the rate structure and the tiers. I think I've mentioned a few times, it's really nice to see that these are converging around a pretty predictable pattern, and I'll show you that in the next couple of slides as well. But bottom line, we're in a good range there, 97% of the total. We ended up, as you can see, May and June on the water sales far left there, relatively higher than we expected in those months, which really kind of helped bump us closer to our expected numbers late in the year. Obviously, as we talk about many times, this is weather dependent in many cases, and we have had a cooler summer, especially recently, and you can start to see that in some of our July data we'll get to. And this is the overall water billed water sales on the fiscal year. We do this, in terms of a month by month look back each month, and so this actually is the 12-month total for the year. And so you can see that gradual kind of return to the 10-year average. If you look back from the low point of 19,000 acre feet in fiscal year 22 to now the nearly 21,000 acre feet in fiscal year 25, it's been about a 2 to 3% per year change increase, and so that was generally in line with expectations. If you can kind of, it's a little bit difficult to see here, but the fiscal 23 was a little bit lower in terms of an overall bounce back. It was only 1 to 2%, and then fiscal year 24 and 25 were both closer to the 4% ranges. So we're getting right back into that general 10-year average area of 21,000 acre feet. which is still well below the peak, as you can see, well below the peaks of 18, 19, 20, and 21. But it is a nice kind of longer term average and not longer term balance for the district to be at. We've been including these charts here. This kind of separates the different water sales by the tier for residential water use. Actually, this is all water use here by tier. And so you can see the effect, the kind of the changing of the rate structures there after fiscal 23. So, I think generally speaking, we had a pretty consistent spread, pre-COVID and pre-drought there, fiscal 18 through 21. Obviously, there was a dramatic change in water consumption there, 22 and 23. And then since the new rate structure has been in place for fiscal year 24 and 25, we're seeing a, relatively kind of predictable bounce back into the tiers that we're in now. I would remind the board that we still do have 2 more months of kind of wrapping up the full rate cycle because the rates go into effect in July. We have a 2-month lag on our billing cycle. So this isn't the kind of the final, year end, look back into the tiers, but it does provide a good little glimpse to where the customer consumption patterns are. And I think, we'll take a much bigger look at this in terms of the variance and the kind of the month by month variance and how it compares to the consultants model over the next few months as we get into this. And like I said, this will be kind of the initial groundwork for the next rate cycle in terms of analysis and in terms of how the district is consuming water in the different categories, the different types of customers and the different months of the year. So
One idea, one lens you might want to put on this is looking at what percentage of our customers hit tier 2, hit tier 3, and or hit tier 4. Because this just like everybody is in tier 1 here, right? And
Yeah.
and so maybe that'd be one other angle to check this out.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying here is basically if you're a tier 4 customer, you're in all of these tiers that you see, right?
Exactly.
You're in the tier 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
and 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably a good lens to look at what percent of customers actually make it to tier
Hit there,
4
yeah.
in the
Thanks.
following tier. So we can include that pretty easily going forward. But again, this is the initial look at this, and we'll start to take a much deeper
Great.
dive once we finish our data for next month, and once we start to work more closely and more kind of intentionally with a consultant over the next, couple months and the next year or so. Fiscal 25 and 26, we're just beginning. We have 1 month here, so there's really not a lot to look at. So I won't spend a lot of time on these slides. We're too early to really get any kind of trends here. We're kind of just really processing some of the early invoices, and water revenue is going to be higher than the kind of linear lines would indicate here in the summer because we're in the summer months. We get more of our water here in the summer. So generally speaking, we're seeing that in comparison to last year, we're seeing the predictable, increase in revenue as, each year we do have, programmed rate increases. So we are seeing additional revenue in terms of a gross number, bottom line number. Percent to budget, within their 7 to 8%. That's about where we want to be this time of the year. And capital revenue, just 1 month there, 1 billing cycle, so not a lot to take a look at. Expenses is very similar. Again, 1 month, the July month, has 1 holiday in it. It's typically a relatively, predictable month for us in terms of expenses. Capital will be lumpy as it always is, but especially in the summer, splitting invoices between the 2 fiscal years. We tend to do a lot more of our more expensive construction projects in the summer, when the weather's good. And so we'll probably be ahead of the trend line there, I would imagine, over the next 2 months, and then it'll balance out again over the winter time. I would also remind the board, many of our projects span multiple years, so we'll be kind of bringing forward remaining budget from the prior years to continue and complete the projects. As not every project finishes neatly within a fiscal year, but I'll spend much more time on that in the coming months. As like I said, there's not a lot to really look at here when we're less than 10% of the year. Similar on this, the water sales charts will start to fill this in over time. We were just kind of resetting the budget, the monthly budgets and monthly expectations. Greg works closely on this, or our financial analyst works closely to kind of model last year's revenue, kind of take a look at the longer term average in terms of translating that to what becomes a reasonable monthly budget. And so we're looking pretty good so far here. Like I said, summer months are a little bit easier in the sense of, closer to the high months of the year. I'd remind the board again that, we do have a 2-month billing cycle. So you see some ups and downs based on the actual routes that are read and kind of when we cover our more high volume customers and when we have more dense, routes to read. So you'll see the ups and downs on the month there in the budget columns. Those will obviously end up being the total for the year. And that applies to both fixed fees and water sales. As I mentioned, we have an uneven amount of customers in each monthly route, but we can fill that in the coming months as well. Initial trend lines here for water use. This is again 1 month, so not a lot to take from it other than the fact that we are a little low there. So you can see fiscal 26 as of July, we're 1,649 in terms of acre feet billed. That is a slight decrease from last year, and it's also lower than fiscal 24. Again, we like to have a little bit more data before drawing conclusions, but I think all of us probably are aware it's been a cooler summer than the past couple of years, kind of unseasonably cool. I think there's some data there that also kind of shows that the general levels of kind of evapotranspiration and levels of overall temperature and rainfall have been, much more moderate this summer than the past. I think we also know that the summers have been extended more so into September, October, November in terms of the hot seasons. And so we'll be taking a look at that a lot closer in coming months again, and maybe having to adjust our models accordingly. But for now, we are about, I think it's 3% lower than the prior year in terms of overall, billed water in the first month. But again, more to come on that over the next few months. This is that same chart we've been producing the last few months in terms of by tier. And so again, I think your comment still there holds, Director Smith, in terms of maybe adding another lens for, what percentage of customers make it all the way up into the higher tiers versus the lower tiers. But this again will start to get filled out more completely and kind of make more sense as we get through the summer months. So in summary, our prior year rate revenues ended the year 3% below budget, and that was relatively to be expected. I think we had kind of seen that trend line all through the spring and set our current year budget accordingly. I think one of the commenters noticed that our water consumption was consistent with the budget, meaning that, the water sales, the total amount of water produced by the district and consumed by our customers was consistent with budget, yet our, and it was 4% higher than the prior year, as I mentioned, yet rate revenues were a little bit low. So that is something to take a look at in terms of the spread between the tiers and how consistent that would be with the original consultant expectations and our overall model. We'll take a look at that here in the fall and winter. And then the first month, as I mentioned a few times here in fiscal year 25-26, is slightly below budget in revenue, slightly below budget in water consumption. And we're starting to see just that 1 month of kind of a cooler summer and less water use. So much more here to come in coming months. But for now, we're relatively kind of in a comfortable range in the sense of predictable and within a good range for the first month of the year. Happy to take any questions on this part of the report. Great.
Director Mayer.
I'm just curious, like what kind of what variance you sort of give the budget when you make. So I would assume 3% below is very acceptable. But I just wonder when you make it, do you have an idea in mind of like what would be a variance above and below that to account for?
I mean, yeah, generally speaking, 2 to 3%, it's hard to really be that perfect in any of these categories. And so I think, generally speaking, you would be comfortable with 2 to 3% on one side, but you're always looking at revenues and expenses. And so you kind of hope they, are aligned in the sense if one's low, you want the other to be low as well.
Right.
What you don't want is the opposite kind of trends, right? You don't want expenses up and revenues down. And so I don't really have a number in mind of how how I would generally conceive it. It's just that, 2 to 3% seems to be about as good as you can get when you're this far ahead.
I guess the question is, when do you get concerned? What percent of variance in the deficit direction would you start to be concerned?
Well, two parts about that. I would probably wait until about halfway through the year to really start to dig too far into it because there's so much variability early in the year. And I would more be concerned about the divergence of revenues and expenses rather than, either one individually. And I think anything more than 5% starts to probably pique my ears more so, pique my eyes more so than the 2 to 3%, just based on the overall budget size that we have and the level of reserves that we have. I think, you're going to be in this, uncertain territory in the nature of our business with the fact that we're weather dependent and we have 60,000 customers that are all acting independently out there. So I try not to get overly concerned, but I do like to have a couple, sanity checks throughout the year. Are revenues, expenses lining up? Are we going to end the year where we wanted to end the year? And is there any we can't do much about the revenues mid-cycle, but we can control expenses more. And so that's more of a conversation that we have, obviously, with the board and with the general manager about, is there a time for concern? Is there a time that we need to be a little more careful about our expenses? Is there parts we can pull back, to kind of help them align? And so it's an ongoing process. And, part of it is this monthly check-in with the board. And part of it is, we start getting into our meetings with individual departments during the budget cycle to find out if there's more, that I'm not seeing on the top line results, kind of more anecdotally or more they know is coming in the future. You start to get the information from bids on the capital projects, or the other bids going over the engineer's estimates. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. And I try to kind of pull all those factors in, more around the winter time. And then, depending on the nature of the information we're getting, like I said, share it with the board, share it with the general manager, and start to talk through it with the senior leadership team.
Thank you.
Yep. Seems like we can move the dial on expenses more than we can control the revenue side.
Definitely.
On a month by month basis. I'm just curious what learnings you had from last year that helped you form the budget for this year for the top line. And as it looks like you're 15% higher across the board each month, but I'm not sure. And if you look at like January, February, March, April, those were our low months. We were way lower than budgeted and predicted last year, but we seem to be predicting those numbers to go way up again. So I'm just, and any lessons you can say that you learned, because last year was truly a first learning year with this new full budget.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the part of it is we have our 4-year rate study that really tells you kind of the overall shape of where revenues are going to go. And so that's the first layer you look at is the overall kind of rate study and the initial plan. And then we're taking kind of intermittent looks at where kind of actuals or comparison to there. And so that's what we did a lot last spring was are the actual revenues we're seeing coming in consistent with the original expectation. And we saw, yes, they're pretty close, so there was no need to change the overall budget. It wasn't too much higher, it wasn't too much lower. And as I just showed there, it's within 3%. So not that that's an immaterial change, but I think it's still enough to say, within a year or so that can right the ship, that we can kind of recover. And it is more of a longer term look over the year and over the 4 years as opposed to any one particular month. And so the hard part is when we look back on historical data, we have a whole different rate structure and a whole different, I guess we have a different customer mix. Customers change, customers use water differently. There's changing behavior patterns and changing, signals from state and local authorities. So it's hard to be perfect about the month-to-month part. That's what I'm getting at. The month-to-month kind of.
Well, I think with the
estimates
rates,
are tough.
given the impact on higher water users, are probably going to have an outsized impact on the high water months. And so my guess is you're still too high on the low water months and maybe too low on the high water months. And maybe some sort of sensitivity analysis that would look at that might help you on a month by month basis.
I think
Not
you're
that it's
pro- I think you're
important. I
probably right.
agree. The year outlook is more important, but
Mhm.
I
I think you are
start
right.
with
And I
that.
think that's one of the things that Greg and our finance team was looking at is can we get the month to month better? Because last year when we set the budget, we had 1 year to go with. Now we have 2
Right.
years to go with. And so you start kind of looking at the trends over time and kind of the areas of the district. And so I think we're always getting a little bit better at it. I think that the first year was a little bit, I don't want to say a guess, but the first year was kind of really, hoping that things matched.
Yeah.
I think now that we have 2 years of data, we have a little more certainty. We can use the trends, but rather than using 10-year trend lines, we have to kind of use 2 and 3 year trend lines in terms of the month to month, just to capture kind of the more recent behavior patterns. And so it's always going to be a guessing game. I don't have a great answer for you other than, we look at it every year. We're constantly kind of modifying as we need to. And I'm looking forward to kind of working with some fresh eyes over the next year or two, or I should say the next year, to see if we can hone those in a little bit better. And so we're closer, like I said, in the low months and high months, and have a better understanding of how the water's being used.
Well done on the overall budget. You were darn close, especially given the complexities of it. And we're off to a good start in July. Any public comments?
Yes, Ms. Ginger Sodders Mason.
I just have some questions, and would it be wonderful if you could reduce the expenditure side of everything? I'm wondering where in the materials, supplies, and operations and insurance you would find the fluoride expenditures, realizing that handling that hydrofluorosilicic acid is very dangerous, and I'm sure the insurance for the maintaining that supply and the people who use and work with it would be reduced, and also the operations and supplies, the amount of expenditure for the toxic chemical would be gone. So my question is, how much would you save if you didn't add that stuff?
Thank you. Great. Any more?
There are no further
Okay,
speakers.
terrific. Moving on to the next item, which is our quarterly investment report.
All right, and that's me again. I don't have a presentation for this one teed up. I'll kind of just walk you through the staff report. So this quarterly investment report is a reminder. We bring this, quarterly to the board, and that is a requirement of California financial management. And so this represents the investment earnings and investment portfolio as of June 30th, 2025. So that wraps up the fiscal year last year. We ended the year with about 74 million in deposit in our LAIF, which is a local agency investment fund. We had 11.2 million in our money market fund with Fidelity, 11 million with our Vanguard Reserves Federal Money Market Fund, and the remainder in our checking account. I would remind the board and maybe point out that those last two I mentioned, the Fidelity Government Bond and Vanguard Reserves Fund, were a part of our changing to our policy we looked at over the spring in terms of opening up additional money market funds that are of the safe and kind of secure quality. So we increased our overall percentage within our portfolio to 20% of those, from 10% to 20%. And so we're kind of diversifying our investments there. I would say overall, we earned an investment income of 3.8 million last year, and that was well above the budget. And I know we talked about through the budget cycle, but I think that the dramatic increase in rates between when we first set the budget and between obviously the end of the fiscal year is shown here. So our budget was about 500,000, and we made 3.8 million. So that windfall, or kind of additional interest earnings, really helped offset a lot of that rate revenue shortage that we talked about in the prior item. So being able to cover up, an additional 3 million or 3.5 million in overall revenues was great. And I think it's a benefit for our customer base. It certainly offsets the need to have rates fund the entire district's portfolio. Average yield for fiscal year in terms of the LAIF money market fund, which is the majority of our funds, is 4.4%, which again is very healthy and has been pretty consistent for the last year or so. I would kind of make a note in the attachment I have there that that overall yield is starting to tick downwards. I know there's been a lot of talk and kind of national news about where interest rates should go and should they start to make cuts at the federal level. We're starting to see slight ticks downward in the overall kind of types of investments that we're in, which are short term and obviously very secure. And so I do expect the overall yields to be down a little bit. However, I'm hopeful that the board's adoption of the new policy that allows a couple additional investment opportunities for us should help offset that, at least in the short term, and allow us to kind of maintain this higher level of investment earnings and capturing more of what's out there for us, at least over the next year or so. But it's something we're monitoring and something we'll continue to keep the board apprised of in future meetings.
Great. Cool. Any comments?
No, thank you very much.
And any lessons learned from shifting some funds to the money markets as our new approach?
I think it's always the best practice to kind of have more options available. I think especially, this doesn't not reflected here, but we have, the board has authorized now investments in what's called the Joint Powers Authority investments. Those are pooled investments, again, very safe underlying securities. I think knowing that that's available, I think that wasn't something that had been talked about much here at the district, knowing that was an option for us. It wasn't even a permitted investment. I think that the research that our team did into that really showed that we have more options available with a little more flexibility in terms of the underlying assets, still very safe, very secure, and just knowing that that we have more options other than just LAIF. I think typically we had been either in LAIF or we had kind of got into riskier side investments, and so knowing there's 4 to 5, different kind of options within that very safe and secure, area, it just gives me comfort knowing that we can kind of move things around. I think also knowing that most of these investments are very liquid, which is good for us. We can be nimble if we need to, and allowing us just to kind of carve off, like I said, additional, not 2%, but 2 to 3 basis points on our investment portfolio, I think helps us over the long term. So just kind of looking into what the market has available and looking into the fact that we have more flexibility going forward, I think it's just it gives me more comfort, and know that the funds are liquid and we can move them back as needed also gives me more comfort. So
And we talked about potentially pooling our money with other like agencies or hiring outsourced managers. Any thoughts or progress on that?
yeah, so that's that JPA that I was just referring to. And so that, I think the professional managers of those, they're still professional, many managers in those areas. And so when we're looking at is the California Asset Management Program, and we're beginning to take steps to areas. And so we're just beginning to scratch the surface there, and I'll have more information for you on that in the next quarterly report. But those are the actions we're taking
Cool.
right now. Kind of
Yeah, I'm
behind the
most
scenes.
interested in your process and how you make those decisions.
Yeah, we can report on that.
Terrific. Any public comments?
There are none.
Okay, terrific. Well, I think that wraps up our meeting. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, team. Thank you, Vicky, for presenting. Our next meeting is on September 25th at 9:30 in the morning. It's a special meeting of the Board of Directors for the Finance and Committee and Administration Committee, and we are adjourned.